The Nightmare Before Christmas began as a dream Disney tried to bury. A skeleton with a heart, trapped between holidays and worlds. But behind the pumpkins and the presents, it was defiance stitched with wonder. The man who made it move frame by frame, one heartbeat at a time. The poem that started it all, scribbled by a young animator chasing ghosts. And the artists who drew a haunted world, giving it life in shadow. These are 20 weird facts about The Nightmare Before Christmas. And hidden inside the snow and the shadows, it was the idea too strange for Disney to handle. Seasons turned, the lights dimmed, but somewhere in the dark, Jack kept singing. Number 1. Before The Nightmare Before Christmas ever jingled across a movie screen, it started as a strange idea inside Disney, one that the studio wanted to bury. In the early 1980s, a young Tim Burton was an animator dreaming of ghosts, skeletons, and lonely monsters while everyone else drew cheerful animals. He pitched a short film about a skeleton who falls in love with Christmas. Disney's response? Absolute silence. It was too dark, too unsettling, too Burton. Instead, they handed him a live-action project, Hansel and Gretel, which he filled with robot samurai and nightmare Candymen. It aired once on Disney Channel and traumatized a generation of kids. Then came Frankenweenie. His heart felt short about a boy reviving his dead dog. That was the final straw. Disney fired him for being too weird, and so the strange little story he'd written, the one about Halloween meeting Christmas, was locked away in the vault. For nearly a decade, it stayed there, forgotten, until one day, Disney came knocking again. Number 2. Nearly a decade after firing him, Disney came crawling back. By the early 1990s, Tim Burton was no longer the strange animator they'd dismissed. He was the director behind Batman and Beetlejuice, the man who turned weirdness into gold. And deep inside Disney's archives sat a forgotten poem he'd written years earlier, The Nightmare Before Christmas. After the massive success of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, studio chief Jeffrey Katzenberg was desperate for another visual breakthrough, something bold, handmade, and unlike anything else in theaters. Burton's Lost Story suddenly looked like the perfect gamble. He didn't even have to pitch it again. The studio already owned it, so they dusted it off, gave it new life, and put Burton back in charge as producer. The irony was delicious. The same company that once called his vision too dark for Disney now wanted that very darkness to lead them into a new era of animation. The misfit they'd fired had become their secret weapon, and his buried dream was finally rising from the vault. Number 3. Everyone calls it Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, but Burton didn't direct a single frame. The real mastermind behind the movie's haunting motion was Henry Selick, a stop-motion veteran making his first feature. While Burton was busy finishing Batman Returns, Selick and a small army of animators toiled away in a San Francisco warehouse, crafting Halloween Town one frame at a time. They moved each puppet by hand, 24 tiny adjustments for every second of film. Burton's sketches became living creatures through Selick's obsessive precision. Jack's grin, Sally's trembling hands, even Zero's floating glow, all came from the painstaking work of hundreds of unseen artists. Burton may have dreamed the world, but Selick made it breathe. His stop-motion direction turned drawings into souls, giving movement to melancholy and rhythm to the impossible. It was a strange collaboration, one man's vision, another man's patience, but together, they built a holiday dream that would never stop moving. Number 4. What looked effortless on screen was pure torment behind the scenes. The Nightmare Before Christmas took nearly 3 years to make, with over 100 animators working frame by frame, moving puppets, lights, and props a fraction of an inch at a time. It wasn't animation, it was endurance. Each second of film required 24 individual photographs. That meant months of work just to finish a few minutes. Jack Skellington alone had over 400 hand-carved heads for every smile, smirk, and scream. Sally's hair moved on invisible wires. Zero's ghostly body glowed from a sheet of latex, and entire sets were rebuilt to fit each new shot. Animators called it stop-motion hell. But through the exhaustion and madness, they built something miraculous. A living world made of stillness and patience. Every flicker, every shadow, every heartbeat of Halloween Town came from human hands. And when it was finally done, the nightmare moved. Number 5. When Disney first saw Jack Skellington, they panicked. A skull with no eyes? Too creepy, too empty, too wrong for a hero. Executives pushed to give him pupils, big, friendly cartoon eyes audiences could connect with. But Tim Burton and Henry Selick refused. They argued that Jack's spirit didn't live in his eyes. It lived in his movement, in the graceful tilt of his head, the curiosity in his gestures, and the longing in his voice. They fought the note and won, though not without consequence. Disney quietly moved the film under its darker touchstone label, distancing it from the main brand. But the decision saved Jack's soul. His hollow sockets became part of his charm, expressive without emotion, haunting without cruelty. In the end, the skeleton who wasn't supposed to work became one of the most beloved characters in animation. Jack didn't need eyes to see, he just needed wonder. Number 6. Jack Skellington wasn't just one man, he was two. Actor Chris Sarandon gave the Pumpkin King his smooth, theatrical speaking voice, while composer Danny Elfman sang every note that carried Jack's longing and loneliness. Elfman didn't just perform the songs, he lived them. Drawing on his own struggles as a musician caught between fame and emptiness, he poured that ache directly into Jack's search for meaning. Sarandon matched Elfman's tone so precisely that most audiences never noticed the switch. Together, they created one soul split in two, the dreamer and the voice inside his head. That's why when Jack sings, it doesn't feel like a performance, it feels like confession. Number 7. The Nightmare Before Christmas wasn't planned as a musical, it became one out of desperation. When Tim Burton first hired Beetlejuice writer Michael McDowell to adapt his poem, the script fell flat. The dialogue was stiff, the tone uneven, and the rhythm that made the poem magical just vanished. Weeks passed, and the story refused to sing. So Burton did something radical. He threw out the script and called on his longtime collaborator Danny Elfman, the musician behind Oingo Boingo and the soundtracks to Batman and Edward Scissorhands. Burton explained the story scene by scene, and Elfman began to write songs instead of words. Within weeks, Jack's lament, "What's This?" and Sally's song poured out like poetry set to dream. Once the music existed, the rest of the film finally had a heartbeat. Writer Caroline Thompson came in to stitch together the story, but it was Elfman's melodies that carried the soul. The result wasn't just a movie with songs, it was a story sung into existence, born from writer's block and saved by music. Number 8. Sally wasn't always the gentle heart of The Nightmare Before Christmas. At first, she was nearly cut from it. Disney executives thought a ragdoll stitched together from spare parts was too macabre for family audiences. Her detachable limbs, her stitched smile, even her habit of poisoning her creator, all of it felt too dark for a children's film. But Tim Burton and Henry Selick refused to lose her. They softened her edges, gave her a tender loneliness, and let Catherine O'Hara's fragile voice carry her pain. Suddenly, the creepy doll became the soul of the story, a quiet spirit of courage and devotion in a world ruled by monsters. Sally may have been built from broken pieces, but she became the one character who never fell apart. Number 9. Before The Nightmare Before Christmas found its jolly Sandy Claus, Tim Burton had a very different name in mind: horror legend Vincent Price. He was Burton's idol, mentor, and the voice of gothic elegance, already immortalized in Vincent and Edward Scissorhands. Price agreed to bring Santa to life with his signature warmth and grace, but tragedy struck. After his wife, Coral Brown, passed away in 1991, his voice changed, heavy with sorrow. Director Henry Selick remembered, "He sounded too sad, too broken for Santa." Burton replaced him with Edward Ivory, but Price's shadow still lingers, the master of gothic heartbreak haunting Christmas one last time. Yet even with its new Santa, the scene itself nearly vanished. Disney executives called the kidnapping Santa Claus sequence too dark, too cruel, the moment that might scare away families. Burton refused to cut it. To him, it was the story's beating heart, the moment Jack's dream turns dangerous. The compromise was simple but vital: tone down the terror, keep the truth. Without it, the film loses its lesson. With it, Christmas and Halloween both learn to live with their monsters. Number 10. Among all the monsters, ghosts, and skeletons that haunted The Nightmare Before Christmas, the hardest effect wasn't some elaborate creature, it was a doorknob. In the scene where Jack discovers the grove of holiday doors, he pauses before the Christmas tree portal, his skull reflected in its golden knob. It lasts only seconds, but it nearly broke the crew. To capture that reflection, animators had to move Jack and the camera in perfect sync, frame by frame, while adjusting the lighting to keep his face gleaming in the curved metal. Every tiny shift meant restarting the setup from scratch. No computers, no digital touch-ups, just a gleaming doorknob, a stubborn reflection, and weeks of painstaking work for one brief, perfect moment of cinematic magic. Number 11. Before Jack's showdown with Oogie Boogie was finalized, The Nightmare Before Christmas almost ended with a shock. In the original storyboards, Jack tears open Oogie's burlap shell, only to reveal Dr. Finkelstein underneath, cackling that he'd staged the chaos to teach Jack a lesson about meddling with other holidays. Henry Selick liked the twist, but Tim Burton hated it, calling it a Scooby-Doo ending. The reveal was scrapped, replaced by a pure creature unmasking and a cleaner moral. That single change reshaped the film's tone, from ironic to mythic, and let Jack's redemption stand on its own. Sometimes the best twist is the one you never see. Number 12. Jack Skellington's bones carried the DNA of both cinema and art history. His design came straight from Tim Burton's sketchbooks, a skeletal dandy inspired by the gothic elegance of Edward Gorey, mixed with the exaggerated poise of a fashion model and the balletic grace of Fred Astaire. To capture that strange beauty, animators studied dancers and silent-era comedians, choreographing every gesture like a piece of stop-motion theater. Even Jack's walk, that rolling glide between frames, was engineered for rhythm, not realism. The result was a character who looked dead but moved with impossible life, proof that even a skeleton could dance when carved by artists who believed in ghosts. Number 13. Before it was built in miniature, Halloween Town was born in ink. Henry Selick and his art team studied the eerie elegance of illustrators like Edward Gorey and Ronald Searle, artists whose drawings dripped with long shadows, spidery lines, and strange humor. Their worlds weren't perfect. They were crooked, smudged, and alive with personality. That imperfection became the blueprint for The Nightmare Before Christmas. To bring those sketches into 3 dimensions, artists coated the sets in plaster, then carved cross-hatched textures by hand, like pencil strokes etched into the walls. Even the twisted trees and slanted rooftops were designed to look drawn, not built. The result was a world that felt handcrafted and haunted at the same time. Every crooked house and swirling hill carries that ink-stained soul. Halloween Town wasn't just animated. It was illustrated in motion, a moving drawing that somehow learned to breathe. Number 14. When Tim Burton finally returned to his forgotten dream, he didn't build Halloween Town alone. He called in his old family of outcasts. Composer Danny Elfman came first, writing every song and lending Jack Skellington his singing voice. But that wasn't all. Elfman also voiced Beryl, the clown with the tearaway face, and a few background ghouls who brought the town's chaos to life. Around him gathered familiar faces from Burton's earlier films. Catherine O'Hara, who'd played in Beetlejuice, became Sally, a soft-spoken soul stitched together from loneliness and hope. Paul Rubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman, returned as the mischievous Locke, and Glenn Shaddix, Otho from Beetlejuice, boomed with charm as the two-faced mayor. Together, they felt less like a cast and more like a reunion. Every voice, every laugh, every eerie note came from Burton's circle of loyal collaborators, the same misfits who had built his world from the start. This time, they built one that could sing, dance, and never die. Number 15. Before it was a film, The Nightmare Before Christmas was just a strange little poem. 3 pages scribbled by a young Tim Burton in 1982 while he was still an animator at Disney. Growing up in sunny Burbank, he never saw real seasons change, only the decorations in store windows. One afternoon, he watched as Halloween masks came down and Christmas lights went up, and for a brief, surreal moment, pumpkins and snowmen shared the same shelf. That image stuck with him. The clash of holidays, the collision of moods, the beauty in something that shouldn't exist. He imagined a world where Halloween tried to understand Christmas, and from that curiosity came Jack Skellington's story. It wasn't meant to be scary. It was meant to be bittersweet, a celebration of difference, of loneliness, of longing for something brighter. From that quiet spark in a department store aisle, Burton's poem grew into a legend, proof that sometimes the strangest dreams begin in the most ordinary places. Number 16. Long before it haunted theaters, The Nightmare Before Christmas was meant for television, a stop-motion holiday oddity in the spirit of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to Town. In the early 1980s, Tim Burton pitched it to Disney as a half-hour special, inspired by those old Rankin Bass productions he'd grown up watching. But where those were sweet and cheerful, his version was eerie, elegant, and full of shadows. Disney didn't know what to do with it. Executives said no, calling it too dark for kids and too strange for adults. The project was shelved, the poem forgotten, and Burton moved on. But the dream lingered. A decade later, after the success of Beetlejuice and Batman, that same too weird idea was reborn as a feature film. The television special that never was became one of cinema's most enduring holiday traditions. And every year, when families gather to watch Jack Skellington take flight, they're really seeing what was meant for TV, a ghost of a Christmas special that grew up into a legend. Number 17. When The Nightmare Before Christmas neared completion, Disney started to panic. The film's skeletal hero, stitched-up heroine, and bug-filled villain felt far darker than anything the studio had ever released. Executives worried that the tone was so macabre, the MPAA might slap it with a PG-13, a death sentence for family audiences. So the studio played it safe. The film was released under Disney's darker Touchstone label. A few grim shots were softened, and the marketing leaned more on fantasy than fright. The gamble paid off. The movie landed a PG, just dark enough to thrill kids and edgy enough to intrigue adults. In trying not to frighten families, Disney accidentally created the most beloved scary movie ever made for them. Number 18. After The Nightmare Before Christmas became a cult phenomenon, Disney saw dollar signs and wanted more. In the early 2000s, executives executives pitched a sequel that would have sent Jack Skellington on another holiday-hopping adventure, but there was one catch. It would be made in CGI. Tim Burton shut it down immediately. "Jack is pure stop motion," he said. "If he ever moved like a computer, he'd lose his soul." For him, the magic of Nightmare wasn't in the story. It was in the craft, the texture of clay, the flicker of imperfection, the human touch in every frame. One firm refusal from Burton ended the sequel dream right there. No CGI, no revival, just one perfect film that stayed exactly as handmade as its hero. Number 19. When The Nightmare Before Christmas first hit theaters in 1993, it wasn't a massive success. It earned just over $50 million. Respectable, but nowhere near Disney's fairy tale blockbusters. Critics admired it, audiences were puzzled, and the studio quietly moved on. But outside the spotlight, something was brewing. On VHS and later DVD, Jack Skellington found his audience. The kids who'd grown up loving monsters, misfits, and midnight moods. By the 2000s, Nightmare had exploded into a pop culture phenomenon. Jack's grin appeared on t-shirts, backpacks, and even coffee mugs, outselling Disney's own icons. At Hot Topic, his face became a symbol of beautiful rebellion, a bridge between goth teens and nostalgic adults. Disney finally embraced what it once rejected. Re-releases in IMAX, 3D, and special Halloween showings turned the film into a seasonal juggernaut. The misfit movie they once feared became one of their most profitable empires. Proof that sometimes the weirdest ideas are the ones that rule the kingdom. Number 20. When Chris Sarandon stepped into the recording booth to voice Jack Skellington, he didn't have a full script, just scattered pages and rough sketches. He recorded scene after scene with no idea how the story would actually end. Months later, sitting in the theater at the premiere, Sarandon finally saw the film in its complete form. He watched Jack fall, rise, and rediscover his purpose, all for the first time, just like the audience. "It felt like seeing a dream I didn't know I'd had," he said. That surprise made his performance feel even more genuine. Every line, every note of wonder came from a man exploring the same strange, beautiful world that still enchants fans today. Bonus fact: more than 30 years later, Danny Elfman still brings The Nightmare Before Christmas back to life every Halloween, performing the full score live with orchestras around the world. Each October, he steps on stage as Jack once more, grinning beneath orange lights, his voice echoing through packed arenas. "What's this?" becomes a chorus of thousands, a shared spell that collapses the distance between film and memory. For a night, Halloween Town lives again. Every ghost, every monster, every lonely dreamer. The magic never fades. It just waits for the season. The Nightmare Before Christmas began as a doodle, was buried as a failure, and rose again as a cultural icon. It proved that the things we're told are too strange are often the ones that last forever. Decades later, Jack Skellington still stands between two worlds, the living and the dead, Halloween and Christmas, smiling like he knows something we don't. Maybe he does. Because in the end, this story was never about scaring us. It was about reminding us that wonder doesn't have to fit neatly into a season. It just needs a place to belong. If this world still casts its spell on you every October, drop a comment. Tell us what magical classic we should unwrap next. Because some stories don't fade with time. They just keep singing.